In this video, we're going to finish building the shelf for the head remodel. First thing I'm going to do is fill the holes with some 610 from West Systems. It's a pre-mixed epoxy. It already has the filler mixed in with it. This is great stuff and it makes the job go by much quicker. So I went ahead and filled all these holes that were left over from the last shelf supports. Next, I'm going to make templates, and I'm using a foam board. And basically, to make the templates for these, you just cut out your basic shape that you think that the hole or the spot that you're going to be putting them in is, and then from there you just maneuver these shapes around by taping the edges and fitting them together until they fit pretty much perfectly in there. This is the easiest way to do this because all the angles in a boat are pretty much different. Next, I'm going to start the lamination of the shelf. Instead of using wooden dowels, what I'm going to use is the 610. Since it's a pre-filled thickened epoxy, it can act just like the dowels. So what I'm going to do is drill holes just like I would for dowels, sand and clean all of my edges. Then I'm going to fill all the holes with the 610. Put your boards together, clamp or screw them down. I use the screw down method here, just pressing them as hard as I can together and then screwing the boards down. Then once I've done that, went ahead and squeegeed all of my excess epoxy out of the way. While I'm waiting for the epoxy to cure, I'm going to fit all of my shelf supports and make sure that they are the correct sizes. I beveled the edges on my shelf supports to give it a little extra smoothness look. Once the epoxy cures on your laminated shelf, go ahead and lay down your templates that you had made earlier. Trace them out onto your laminated boards. Now just a note on the wood that I'm using a pine, and contrary to some beliefs, a lot of people say pine's not good to use on a boat. Well, pine is one of the best woods to use on a boat, especially a longleaf pine. The reason why is pine has a lot of sap content to it, which gives it a lot of water repellency. It's very resilient to rot. Now, the downfall of using pine is it is a soft wood, so I wouldn't use it on anything that you need something anchored to, or one of your outside surfaces that's going to be banged up a lot. So pine good on rot and light surfaces. Just remember not to use it on anything that you need strength for. Starting my prep, sand every area that you're going to paint. Then I bring my board out to the outside, and what I'm going to do for my actual shelf boards, this is what I'm going to cut all my pieces out of. I chiseled off all the excess epoxy and then cut my shapes out. Go ahead and fit my shapes inside the compartment to see how they're fitting, and they seem to be fitting pretty good. And then I can mark where I want the actual shelf height to be at this point. Again, I'm using 610. This is on the back shelf support. I used the blue tape to hold it in place, keeping good pressure on it and then monitoring it, make sure it's not slipping down or anything like that. While waiting for the supports to cure, I can go ahead and tape off all of the areas around where I'm going to be painting. This can be painstaking though. Next, this is everything taped off and my supports are cured. I tend to want to cover all the areas around where I've already worked so I don't damage any areas that have already been done. At this point, I've already primed all of my surfaces and I'm sanding, and this will be my first paint coat. Same inside the shelf area. You can either go straight into painting if you have a thicker paint, or you can prime first. I like to paint all of my corners and hard to reach areas first, and then I go back with a roller and then smooth out all the corners and then all the other surfaces with it. This is probably the second coat of actual paint on the shelf pieces. Now we'll move into the laminate, and I've pre-cut a small piece of laminate just large enough to cover the top of the actual shelf. Now, pre-cutting my laminate with the router allows me to get it down to a more manageable size to bring it inside the boat and then apply the next steps, which is applying the contact cement. Now, remember, when using contact cement, you need to make sure that it is completely dry. It only contacts itself when it is dry. I typically use about 2 layers of it, so I wait for one to be almost completely dry, then I'll go ahead and apply the next layer of contact cement. Now make sure you put this on both surfaces, and it will typically take about 4 hours to dry. For the outlet slot, I made the trim out of an old piece of trim that I had left over. Here it is glued up. Next, I put wooden dowels on top of the shelf itself, and that way the laminate does not stick directly to the top as soon as I put it on there. This allows a small space in between, so I can slowly pull one dowel out at a time, starting from the center and then rubbing my way out until it sticks. Next, I use a pressure roller and push down as hard as I can, rolling this on to make sure that everything is completely secured. Next, using a flush trim bit on my router, I trimmed off all the edges, and then with a file, smooth all of your edges out. Now for the front rail on the shelf, I marked where I wanted all of my screw holes to be. Then I used a 3/8 inch Forstner bit, which is the size of the teak plugs I'm going to be using, and I drilled shallow holes for all of my plugs. Then using a smaller drill bit, I drilled the holes needed for my screws. Then pressing on the rail itself to keep it flush, making sure that it's lined up everywhere, I ran a screw through the middle hole, which will keep the rail in place while putting in all of my other screws. All of my screws are in now, and in this next shot you can see the little bit of the shallow hole that I have. Using a little bit of epoxy or wood glue, you just push your plug right in, make sure it's in as far as it can go. Once your epoxy is cured, use a flush cut saw and cut the tips of the plugs off. Make sure you try not to cut the wood, because if you go at a little bit of an angle, you can cut into your wood and it's going to cause a lot more sanding. You would then tape off all of your edges, sand it to a 240 or a 320 grit, and then varnish. Once you've got your varnishing done, then you're finished with pretty much all of your shelf pieces and you're ready for fitting of your final completed shelf. I do go over complete varnishing techniques in my flooring video, which is coming up next, and I do have better techniques or better explanations of how to cut your laminate in the prior video of the countertop installation. If you like the video, please leave a comment or subscribe, and if you have any suggestions or any how-tos that you'd like to know on a boat, please submit them and I'll do what I can to get them done as well. Thank you again for viewing my video, and you have fun with your project.